listeners, and welcome to the Voices in Leadership podcast. I am your host, Melissa Andrews, President and CEO of Leading Age Virginia. And you are in for a real treat, a very different conversation today with my friend and colleague, Heather Harmon from Henderson. Welcome, Heather. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am
appreciate
too.
the time.
Yeah, we planned and rescheduled this a couple of times. So a gift this holiday season that we get to be sitting down and chatting. Heather, why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about you?
A little bit about me. Well, I was born, no, I'm just kidding.
Sure, go for it.
I'm actually pretty long-standing resident of Williamsburg, Virginia. Have done a lot in our community, have been involved in a lot of things. I've just always been immersed in the community in some form or fashion. And I think when I came to work originally for Henderson back in 2000, there was a little bit of time in there. I was like, okay, it's time to retire. You know, it was just that time. And then I found myself volunteering and volunteering. And does Heather ever say no? And it just kind of culminated. And then I came back to Henderson. That's been almost 6 years ago now, which was a really interesting and fun move to be here and come back. But I love construction. I absolutely love everything about our company, what we do, what we stand for, the family environment, the flexibility that they give me. I get to walk around Busch Gardens and say, we built that, you know, just so many great things. So that when we started immersing ourselves really heavily in senior care and those things, it started grabbing at my heartstrings. When I volunteered for a local hospital here is where I kind of got immersed into what I call my passion project, I guess, for lack of another term for that one. But Henderson Inc. has been very gracious in affording me the flexibility to do all those kind of things. So, you know, you're in here working on pre-construction on a large project like we're at Westminster Canterbury in Richmond, and we love watching that vibrancy project come to fruition and on multiple campuses. So that's a little bit about how I got to this chair today.
So, and I love seeing the man in the crane, and everybody's fascinated with the man in the crane at Westminster Canterbury Richmond. But will you tell us about Leading Age Virginia? We love our relationship with Henderson and appreciate the support that you all give the association. But will you tell us a little bit about Henderson Inc.? Because it really is a unique story of the company, and it really is a family business.
We truly are. We started back in 1957. Granddaddy started us. He's not my granddaddy, but right. We all kind of lovingly call him that. Pete took over the company in the 80s. His daughter now runs our company, Leslie Henderson Murphy. She was not handed anything. I love that we've all earned our place, so to speak, if that makes sense. And we've done I would say we're a medium contractor, and we've done a lot of things, just from small tenant fit outs to being involved in large projects like Westminster Canterbury with our partner, and almost everything in between. But we truly have, in those generations, manifested a love for community and senior care. I was just way overly excited when we got to really dig deep into that. And then our membership and working alongside Leading Age, who supports so much of what I personally believe in and what our company and culture believe in, is even more exciting. So, you know, Leslie's like, yes, please go do that. Go support them. Go sit on the committee. Do what you can do to support. So, you know, we're very grateful for what Leading Age does as well. So it's been a beautiful relationship, and I'm excited that I get to have my passion project kind of roll right into.
Thank you. And I know everybody's like, what is this passion project? And we're going to get to that. But when you speak to specifically your role at Henderson, what is it that you do?
Well, I would call myself a Jill of all trades.
Yeah.
And that is actually why I probably love it more so than any other job I could have been. So I deal with marketing. I deal with pre-construction. So part of what I do is put together proposals. Part of what I do is meet new clients and bring them in the door and show them who we are and what we do and what we can do for them. Or I could be putting together client Christmas gifts. I could be doing all kinds of wonderful things. So yeah, business development and marketing are kind of the umbrellas I fly under.
You know, Heather, in the last podcast I recorded, I got to speak with Melissa Pritchard from SFCS Architects. And we, this podcast really started with a group of women in leadership, a steering committee, talking about just kind of the unique challenges and stories of women in the workplace, and particularly women in our field. And Melissa and I had a conversation around female architects and, when she was in school and there, kind of that trajectory for her. And I'm curious because, when people think about contractors and construction, they don't typically think of women. And, when I think of Henderson, of course, I think of a female-led company. And I'm interested in your history as a woman leader and Henderson as a female-led organization. Do you just have any perspective to share on that?
People ask me that a lot of times. I think I was born to be a leader of sorts. I love being involved in the community. I just did my exciting project. I chair with our local Chamber of Commerce our Christmas parade. So last Sunday night we got to do that.
Cool.
So it is super cool, but it gives me this perspective of leading different types of people, because I do work in an industry since 2000 that is very male dominated, but I've watched that shift. And I remember many years ago, it was like, all right, I gotta be tough. I've got to fit in, but I need them to be a little scared, but I still have to be soft. I have to be. And I remember it just being, it was such a head game almost, just trying to figure out, how do I succeed? How do I get that respect? How do I stand in front of people and have them walk with me and not feel like I'm, I can't think of that term now, but when you feel like you're faking your position.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's it. I read so many books, sometimes the words just go fluttering around in the brain. So here at Henderson, I think it's really cool. They know I have my specific lane that I love. I will lead projects and do the things that I need to do. But as far as like growing into major leadership positions and stuff in the company, it's like, no, y'all got that. I like to use my leadership in our community and lead these different projects. And then, of course, this passion project of mine requires a whole lot of creative thinking and stuff. So I think as women, we just have to evolve. I never minimize what I am. I try to never fault any woman or human for that matter about, trying to balance and stuff, because it's hard. It's hard for any human, but we truly are a blessed group of women in this world that gets the opportunity to help fight. And hopefully it'll be a little bit easier in the next 20, 30 years. So our industry is certainly shifting and it's fun to watch.
I bet it is. I don't know if you saw the Barbie movie. You just reminded me of America Ferrera's monologue where she was like, we have to be soft, but not too soft. We have to work hard, but not too hard. She was just talking about the challenges. Well, let's go, because you've said passion project, and I don't think you should use air quotes anymore when you say it, because I've heard you talk about this. Why don't you describe the passion project so I don't spoil it for our listeners? I want to hear it in your words. How did you find yourself in this new world that you didn't anticipate finding yourself in?
I certainly did not anticipate that. That is for sure. And when people ask me that question, it's kind of funny, because when I look back now from 51 years on this planet, I always had an inkling in the back of my brain. I just never let it roll out. And, we process through life and it's like, oh, ding, 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 things are making sense. And it was kind of exciting for me. But 2005, I remember walking into a room and I remember seeing my father lying in a bed. You know, your hero, your father, he was in Florida. I was here in Virginia. It was not an estranged situation, but it was a single mom. I couldn't afford to go see him. And I knew that after a lot of illness, his time had come. So I knew he was in a hospice. So I remember walking in and opening that door, and if trauma could hit, it hit me. It was the most mortifying, fearful, what the heck just happened to me moment in my life. I was mortified to get near my father. I was mortified. He didn't look like himself. He was obviously, you know, at the end of life. And I just remember spending that time in that room. I touched him, but I wouldn't get, and I walked out of that room and I got home and I dealt with that. And I was like, this is not how this should have been, you know? And I was like, well, how do you fix that? So it worked itself through me for years. And then during that time that I was volunteering in a local hospital, we had a nurse come in the room. I volunteered in the office, and she had said something about a patient dying. And the nurses weren't able to be in the room. Well, I was like, well, not on my watch, that won't happen. So that led me on this whole vigil program. So we joined with our local hospice. We got vigil volunteers trained so that we could be there for patients as they were going through those end of life. So nobody in our hospital died alone. Fortunately, I live in a community that's not a thing that happens very often, but it really got me on this role. So here I am, and I'm studying, and I'm like, okay, how can I do this better? What can I do? What can I do? And boom, there I stumbled across a death doula. And I was like, huh, a doula brings life into the world, that kind of coaching. There's people that actually coach the other way. And that led me through all kinds of, I'm a book reader by nature, and I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading. Then I went back and figured out that I like studying too. So I went to a school that's based out of Texas. It's an online program, and got certified as a death doula, midwife. There's many terms that it is. I've gotten certified in life planning. I studied pediatric end of life. I must admit that one, I don't have intimate knowledge of that one. And I think it just broke my heart too much that I just felt like there's plenty of other people. Now I have actually immersed myself in studies at end of life focused with dementia. And that one in particular has really just grabbed onto me. And I'm not sure, I think it's because I'm scared of it, but I've worked alongside some great people, and I'm learning to embrace that aspect. So as I've gone through this, I'm like, okay, I have skill sets that are very different. I love sitting bedside. I truly do. And I know that sounds very weird to some people, but helping families work through what end of life is supposed to look like. How do I get through this? Mom's not eating, helping with all of those in a non-medical, non-denominational perspective. I'm not there to help you get to your maker. I'm not there to tell you that drug's wrong. I'm there to give you options. I'm there to make sure that when you're in that room, whether you're in a hospice, a hospital, or a home, you know, what can I help resolve? What can I help? How do you want the room to feel? The music, the ear, you know, the hearing, as they say, is the last thing to go. You know, and I've had patients tap on my hand because you're going through music because you didn't have the opportunity to know them. And they'll move that hand when they hear that jazz music coming out or something like that. And it's become one of the most beautiful things, I think, that I as a human can embrace, which in turn you watch death, you learn to live. It's just cultured itself in my life. And for a person who's a little OCD, and for a person who is fairly outgoing and very community immersed, well, how can I help people know about doulas? How can I help people understand you can die better? We can go out of this world with without some of those heart-wrenching feelings, and I can help a daughter walk into a room and not be scared to death that she doesn't give her dad that final hug. I mean, that to me drives me probably more than anything. People don't deserve to get cheated out of that. And we all know death is one of those taboo topics we're not allowed to talk about. And it's ridiculous to me that we get two things in life we have to do. We've done one. Congratulations, you are here. People argue that taxes are, you have to pay. And I'm like, technically you do not have to pay those.
Right.
There are consequences.
Right.
We're all going to die. And it's Barbara Carnes, who's one of my favorite. She says it best, it's your final act of living. So I want to make sure people know that there are resources out there. There are people that will aid them in literally designing what they want their death to look like. Obviously, there are caveats to that when we don't have those controls. And I just want every human to know that it's never too early. It's never too late. It's always good to have family understand things. Just to be able to lie on my bed at the end of my life and know that my children do not have to focus on anything other than mom's got everything she wanted. She's got everything she needed. She died happy. She fought for the goals that she wanted. I don't have to worry about, what Cox communication password so that we can cancel the account. I don't want them to focus on any of that. I just want them to sit in the room and be them. You know what I mean? And there's just so many gifts wrapped up into death doulas in general. And I can keep going, Melissa. Sometimes you just got to stop me.
Well, so I want to differentiate a couple of things.
Sure.
So, Leading Age Virginia, part of our membership that is hospice providers. So I want to differentiate a few things. One, you mentioned the Cox password. So, there are obviously end of life advanced directives. There's end of life planning documents that already exist. Then there's hospice. And really, some of what you're describing is for people who know that the end is near. And so you described your father, who it sounds like perhaps was in hospice. You're describing other people who are in the hospital. So, can you help our listeners understand difference between your role as a death doula and the role of a hospice provider? Because I think there are misperceptions out there around what hospice does and does not do, and then how you intersect with that, and then also your role and how that differentiates between what you do and, say, when somebody is moving into a retirement community or assisted living or nursing home, and they're going to be filling out certain documentation that's going to alleviate some of what you just talked about.
So let me see if I can put this all together simply. First and foremost, it's never too early to plan. I am my boys are 29 and 31. One of them is a police officer. His paperwork is in order. There's just never not knowing. The other thing is that death doulas in general have, I would call them personal specialties. So some do things differently. So just because I am what I am as a doula does not mean that we all are. And there's actually niches. That's the word we're going to use.
Yep. Okay.
And hospice in particular it's another one of those taboo. It's like the moment you say somebody's going into hospice, it's like, boom, there it is. Hospice is obviously not that way. I think Jimmy Carter is the perfect example of that. Hospice is not. And it is, for me, in the simplest of terms, hospice is there for medical comfort. Let's keep them comfortable. They have volunteers that come in. The local one that that I support here, they have volunteers and stuff. And typically by the time someone is in hospice, because of the way things go, I don't want to say it's too late for the true doula to get in there and understand and do the things that they want to do, unless they've worked with that person beforehand. My favorite time, well, I have several of them. My favorite time is when somebody gets that terminal diagnosis and they're like, I just need someone to talk to that is neutral, so to speak, and then you can help guide them. Can you go to a doctor's appointment? Sure. Do I give medical advice? Absolutely not.
Right.
Now, if a patient looks at me and their family and they've all agreed that certain things are not going to happen, they don't want those things to happen. Am I going to fight for that person? Yes, ma'am, all day long. But hospice has its true role, and it's beautifully run.
Yep.
And chaplains and the neutral territory there, people's discipline. When people come at me in those situations and they're like, well, Heather, what are your beliefs? My goal is for you to never know my beliefs, never to know anything about me. It's not about me. I will listen. My husband says 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. And that ratio is very good when listening to people as a death doula. I will call that resource. I can't technically, I can't touch a dead body for the most part, because then I go into this funeral director, mortician kind of thing, and I get in trouble. So of course we don't press that one, but I've got resources. I know people, so I'm kind of a conduit of information, and that's, legacy projects. Those are so much fun for me when you sit down with someone and they're like, I really want to leave my grandkids this. Well, let's think about this. How can we wrap this up into something special, or writing letters, or I just really wish I had said goodbye to, or I'm sorry to, and you help those things happen. And that's something that hospice really strives to do. I think they do. It's just hard. They have rules they have to follow. I have rules too, but so I don't know if that totally answers your question, but
It does. I think about it in terms of, we strive to disrupt ageism. We think one of the reasons that people don't plan for their long-term care needs, and one of the reasons they wait so long to make decisions about retirement planning, is, just nobody wants to admit they're growing older. And, we're so youth oriented, particularly in this country. And so when I listen to you talk, I can't help but think about our work in disrupting ageism. It's almost like you're disrupting death. It's, we need to educate people. Like, the reality is we're all going to die. It is the one universal common truth. And we spend so much time trying to avoid this thing that is unavoidable. And what you're trying to do is educate people that, if you get the opportunity to go out with some planning, that you're there to help guide that planning and to support people in that time, but you want them to do it up front. So whereas I want, my mom says to me recently, my mom is 74. She lives 0.8 of a mile away from us, and she's in a 2nd floor walk up. And I desperately want her out of this apartment. It is not believe it or not, I'm going to just tell the ugly truth. It is not a continuing care retirement community. So there are no services or supports. It's just a regular old rental. She rented it without consulting me. How dare her live her own life? And she is, 1 fall away. And so we're sitting at our kitchen table recently, and she said, I just don't want to burden you. And I said, well, guess what? You already have. Because I'm a wonderful only daughter. And she was horrified. And she said, what? And I said, well, you don't have long-term care insurance. And she said, it was too expensive for your dad and I. And I said, and you're in a 2nd floor walk up with exterior staircase, And long and short of it is she finally said, fine, find me someplace else to live with an elevator. And so that is my project. But my point is that even I, in this role, and work I've done for 20 years with Leading Age Virginia and Leading Age National, I can't even get my own mother to plan, right? And although she has talked about how she wants her funeral, and we went to a Motown tribute concert on Saturday, and she started telling me which jewelry she wanted which grandchild to get. And I said, if you don't write it down, it's not going to happen. Like, how much do you want me to remember? Because I'm going to be remembering the passwords. Like, I'm going to figure out the passwords, Mom. I can't navigate. Actually, Heather, maybe I need you to talk to my mother. That's the conclusion.
Gladly.
That's it. But so how do people start having this conversation with their loved ones, and then how do they find people like you to bring into the mix? Like, what's the process, since everybody's living in denial?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny and it's not funny. And studying death, again, you learn to live. And I even, you know, I find myself coaching people all the time, not just about death, but how to live, because you hear plenty of regrets and wishes I had and all of those kind of things. And one of my I have multiple missions, and sometimes I just can't say no, and I get so diversified. But when people start talking about death as a normal conversation, this whole thing's going to be a whole lot easier for us. So part of my objective is just to talk about death. It's
Mhm.
going to happen. It's just normalizing. So even normalizing it within the confines of a home or your family, as you have determined, can be super tricky. So somebody just has to step up. People have to just acknowledge the fact that my dad deserved to have me tell him when he was laying in bed that I love him
Mhm.
and that he did everything great as my father, that I respected him, and that he, you know, and it's taken a whole lot of inner strength to not beat myself up over that anymore. But that strength. So we all kind of have to draw on that inner strength, because I want your mom to have the same end of life and that final act of living that she deserves, whether she wants to or acknowledge it. And sometimes that generation can be a little stubborn. Let's not be unrealistic about that. You know, but I mean, when I have 20 somethings come up and talk to me, it's just a normal thing. Death cafes, all those death dinners and all that kind of stuff, that needs to help. How do you find a doula? That part is still frustratingly a little bit tricky, because there are not enough of us. You know, I find myself getting on stages, coming and talking to, you know, communities and women's groups and stuff. And I find myself having to settle back a little bit because I can't do it all, but I only know of a few other death doulas in Virginia.
Mhm.
And allowing people to understand that this is something that a lot of people are drawn to and don't realize it's there, but helping fulfill some of those gaps so that we can. I just think it would be fabulous if every community, senior care, normal neighborhoods had someone there that could help guide communities and guide the people. You know, this person wants this. I've sat in there and talked to them. They want vanilla. I want chocolate chip cookies in my house when I smell. Just so you are aware of that, Melissa, in
Yep.
case you
I'll
in
send them.
case,
I'll send them.
you're
I'm not
there.
baking.
You know, it just, people deserve. So there are websites. I know that the programming that I've gone through with IDLM, which is International Doula, they have websites where you can, you know, go in and find one that's close to you. But will they necessarily match what you need, the energy? I mean, this is a person that's going to get up in you and get in your head. You know, they don't. You know, maybe you just want some of that outside here, help this planning here. You know, I've looked at green burial. I've had people come about MAID, you know, just the whole, you know, and I don't know how I really truly feel about that, but it's not about me. It's about that person, you know. So I've been pushed and stretched. So allowing that growth to happen has put me in a position where my strength is not being shy about getting up and talking about it. Whereas a lot of death doulas are more that reserved kind of, you know, I just want to be here. So I've kind of given it my mission. And, you know, I've talked to my school about that too. I want to educate. I want to empower people to say, okay, mom deserves this life
Yeah.
and this end of life. And oh my gosh, I want to do what you do, Heather. I want to sit with people. And so that's really kind of become my bigger mission, is really just trying to educate as best I can. And
Yeah.
opportunities like this allow me to do that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite podcasts is We Can Do Hard Things with Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle. And they interviewed a death doula. I think might have shared this with you when we were having cocktails and sushi. And I remember Glennon saying to I cannot remember the death doula's name. She's written books. She's fabulous. It'll come to me after we finish this, I'm sure. And she said, Abby won't discuss death with me. And the doula said, why? And Glennon said, because she's afraid of it. And the doula said, what are you afraid of, Abby? And she said, just what it is. And she said, but you don't know what it is. And she said, what do you wish it was? And Abby Wambach, right? Like retired US Olympian soccer star, I mean, like
He's
a
awesome.
model for, thousands of little boys and girls and grown people who, wish themselves Olympians. Abby said, honestly, I wish I could come back and haunt people and scare them to death. And Glennon's like, you do? You want to haunt? That's my worst nightmare. And the irony that Abby's dream of what death is her wife's worst nightmare. And the doula says, maybe it is. Maybe that is what death is. Maybe we spend so much time fearing the unknown instead of imagining what it could be that would bring us joy. And if we could reframe it in that way, because none of us know. Nobody's coming back to tell us. So she said, my dream of death is that it's rainbows, unicorns, and lots of glitter. This is what the death doula said. And that's what I think of. So when I imagine death, that's what I imagine. So Abby, you imagine coming back and haunting Glennon. Glennon, you better imagine something else. And so maybe as we wrap up our time together, Heather, maybe that is what I would like to leave people with, is maybe reframing that it doesn't have to be scary. I think, for me, having a little one who says to me, I wish you weren't older than the other moms at the bus stop because you're going to die first and leave me here without you. Thanks, Eliza. She ain't wrong. But we think often of what we're going to lose. And we think about the unknown of what we're going toward. And what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you is, let's think about what we can gain in that process, both for us and the people who are going to surround us in those moments. Heather, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would want to leave our listeners with?
There is so much. We could do a whole series. I could get so buried in this, but I do want to leave a little bit of a brief story. I'm going to try and keep it pretty short. It's still kind of heavy on Henderson's heart, but a week and a half ago, one of our employees was involved in a pretty tragic accident and passed away at 19 years of age. He was up on the VCU campus when this happened a week and a half or so ago. And 19 years old, I'm getting chicken bumps talking about it, right? And he worked for us. He worked out in the field. He was an operator. Yeah. We could go into all kinds of, how does it feel when a 19-year-old, right? And we went to his celebration of life on Saturday. So Henderson, as strong as we could be, we brought food, we brought everything. If there wasn't 600-700 people at this event, right? So you're sitting here and, take me home, country roads, all these arms lock, you just had all this movement, but they're talking about Chandler, right? And I don't think I'm crossing any lines by sharing this story at this moment, but one of the gentlemen that was speaking in the front made a comment of live like Chandler and how he did. And I mean, this kid was so funny. He had this big mullet. He was just vivacious. He was energetic. And as a death doula who focuses on end of life quite a bit of her life, I was like, he is the epitome of how to live so that your death means something in a moment as heavy as end of life can be. He lived so beautifully. He was a man of God. He never met a stranger. He wouldn't say no. And that energy of that live like Chandler has manifested in itself. He was with us at the parade last year. We did that Sunday. We carried the bobbleheads with him in this hashtag thing. And that energy is going to catapult itself into the future simply because of a tragic accident. Not that that's simple, but it goes to prove we're going to die. But if we live as beautifully as we can and true to ourselves, we can leave that legacy that will continue to live on. and Chandler's recent passing really did drive that home, that even at 19 years of age, I at 51 would never be able to have that much energy in a room. It was beautiful. So I'll leave it with live like Chandler.
Well, I don't think you should underestimate the energy that you have brought into this world. I am sorry for the Henderson family's loss and Chandler's family loss, 19, how
Mhm.
devastating. Um, the other lesson I have learned from our time together, Heather, is that you never know where your lifelong passion is gonna be hidden or how you're gonna surface it. And I want to recognize the amazing organization that Henderson is, because you are sitting at Henderson right now and there's a whole
Mhm.
bunch of activity. You got a big proposal due. You've got huge projects going on. You got lots of boxes behind you because you're getting holiday stuff together. But they support you being on this podcast with me today, talking about this incredible work you do as a death doula. And I want to recognize that incredibly supportive culture of
Mhm.
Henderson, the fact that you are able to do this work and do the work at Henderson, and just the fact that it's just never too late to for any of us to uncover something new and beautiful that we want to give to this world so that we can live like Chandler, as you said. So thank
Mhm.
you, Heather, for being with us, being with me, and being with all of our
My
listeners.
pleasure. My
Yeah.
absolute pleasure. Anytime with you is great, Melissa.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, listeners, thank you for being here today. Stay tuned for our next podcast and listen, keep on listening. Bye.